for you to have a sustainable business, there has to be a story behind what it is that we do. So I gave birth to my first child with a congenital deformity.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're calling from. This is Kunle Olufemi on the Adventures podcast, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this very episode of Adventures. Welcome. As you know, on Adventures, we seek to bring you the stories of vision and courage behind the organizations and the brands that you see around you every day. By sharing their stories with you, we're hoping to be able to inspire you such that you are able to achieve success faster than they did. And we're super thankful for all the guests that comes or for all our guests that come on the show to share their inspiring stories. Today, we have another wonderful guest for you, and just to tell a little bit about it before we go into it today. We are taking a little bit of a detour into, what I call like, entrepreneurial or entrepreneurship for social change, right? Speaking of, stuffs around not for profit, but nonetheless entrepreneurship. And today we are privileged to have with us a friend, a sister, a visionary who has built a work over the years, and I'm sure that we will find our stories super inspiring. I'm talking about no other person than the founder and the executive director of the Irede Foundation. Now, the Irede Foundation is a not-for-profit organization that is focused on encouraging children living with limb loss to live a life of fulfillment. And you're going to hear a whole lot about that from my friend. Welcome with me, Mrs. Chigbu Crystal. Good morning, Crystal.
Good morning, Kunle. It's so good to be on the adventures. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure, my pleasure, my pleasure. So good to have you around. And like I said, it's such a pleasure to have you around. And you're going to say hello to our viewers, and we will start by, asking you to tell us a little bit about, the Irede Foundation, what you do, the scale of your operations a little bit, and then we'll come back and go a little bit into how it all started. Over to you, Crystal.
The Irede Foundation is a non-profit, just like you said. So our kind of business is different from, you know, every other business. Is the business of doing good or social good, as you may want to call it. And we work with children and young people with disabilities in general. And maybe as we talk in depth about the work that we do, you understand how young people with disabilities come into the work that we do. But overall, we work with children who have been amputated either as a result of congenital issues or as a result of trauma. And at the end of the day, really, what we hope to achieve is have this children and young people live a full life in spite of the disabilities that they've suffered, and make sure that they are limitless while they are doing it. But we don't only look or focus on the children and the young people alone. We also spend some time to focus on their families or caregivers, as the case may be, because in some cases you do have children that are not that do not have families. So all they have is caregivers. Maybe they are a school teacher or their grandma or someone, and helping those people also live limitless life. Um, our work has spanned over the last 13 years. Yeah, I can say 13 years. We clocked 13 in August. And so we were a team of between 6 to 10 core team members. And then we have a lot of volunteers across the globe. As you know, it's a global village, so we take advantage of the fact that we have different people that are interested in the work that we do around the world actually you get volunteers of these people to help deliver the mandate that we have, which is basically making these children live limitless lives.
Wow. Wow. I mean, thinking about it now, 13 years, that's some time, right? I mean, everything feels like yesterday because again, I'm privileged to know when this was kind of, getting started back in the day, right? And, just to think about the fact that it's already 13 years, I mean, time flies. Time flies.
Please, we're
Now,
teenagers.
time flies. But, before we talk a little bit about how you conceived the idea and how all of that kind of started, can you share a little bit about, if you have the numbers, like the number of limbs or the number of children or some of the publications that you've kind of you know produced and distributed and given out, right, to kids in a bid to help them live these fulfilling life, as a coined it.
Of course, the numbers are off the top of my head because the numbers that you deal with on a daily basis. Yeah. So in the last 13 years, we have given over 300, we have given limbs to about 315 children. And I'll explain in depth, but we've given over 670 limbs to these children. The numbers that we look at are in two folds. We look at the children that we're giving the limbs to, and we also look at the number of limbs that we have given them. And so the reason we have those disparity is because we have children that are double amputees, we have those that are losing 3 limbs, we have those that are losing 4 limbs out
Mm,
of the limbs that you know they have no limbs at all. And
yeah.
then we do also replace the limbs for the children. So we have some children that have been with us in the last 13 years, really.
Wow.
We have a child specifically that consistently on, every year, every 2 years, we keep replacing her limb, and she's a double amputee. So
Mm,
pretty much, I would say we've given 670 limbs to about 315 children in the last 13 years across Nigeria. So our operations are not just in Lagos alone. We do give limbs to children everywhere in the country. Once we spot a child who cannot afford to get a limb, we get involved in their lives, till they are 18, by the way. So we keep replacing the limbs for them till they are 18. And, when we started, we were given limbs. And then much later, we realized that we needed to do a bit of advocacy work. And we didn't want to do regular advocacy in terms of just advocating to government and, just the way people do advocate. We realized that our target audience, or our target champions, like we call them, are children. What better way to engage with these children than get they are typical to be, the people that we are advocating to. And so that's how we started our advocacy work to schools. And it's centered around a piece of work that we do that is called Iradians, which are comic books that we use to engage with these children. Again, I'm sure that much later I would delve a little bit more into that. But we also have some publications around, we did some advocacy work also with government and inclusive budgeting, because what is critical for us, not just to give these children limbs, is to ensure that they are going to school. So we um, did a baseline study of understanding how the budget framework in Nigeria does work in terms of uh, ensuring that these children have a quota that is segmented to them for them to have the kind of education that they need. And so we have a publication around that baseline study on inclusive budgeting, which we did about 3 years ago. And did a publishing of it, and it's out there, really people to access. And we're working on some research work also currently, and a publication or will soon be out, and this is work that we're currently doing, not just in Nigeria, but we're partnering with an organization in Belgium to actually uh, publicize this. So I'm sure that before the end of the year, we should have done this publication. So again, I could put a little bit of conversation around it, before we wrap up.
I mean, I can't wait to hear that, to be honest, right? And thanks a lot, Crystal, for sharing all that you have shared, right? To hear that you have directly impacted more than 300 children and giving out more than 600 limbs is so inspiring, right? And I am so eager to hear about how it all started, right? Because I'm sure that in hearing how it all started, our listeners can draw a lot of correlation, between where they are and your story, and so find some inspiration to take the leap of faith, so to say. Right. But before we get into that, you touched on 2 points that I want you to double click a little bit into, right? So number one, you spoke about the fact that when you spot a child or you identify a child who has some affordability challenge, who cannot afford these limbs, right? You take them on and then you support them till they are 18, which means that if a child cannot afford these or a teenager cannot afford the limbs, but they are above 18, they are out of school, right? So to say. So it looks to me that the age 18 and affordability are the two filters through which you pass every request through before you say yes to them. Can share a little bit about these filters and why them?
Um, Thank you. Yes, 18. So I think I'll take it, and the reason 18 is very important for us is because the growth rate actually stops at the age of 18. In some cases, you do have growth spouts at age 21, but we know that when we give you a limb at 18, you can use it sustainably for, say, 5 to 10 years after we've given you that limb. Unlike when you're much younger and we keep changing the limb as you go. So the reason 18 is that mark for us is because the growth rate stops at the age of 18. So pretty much because we work with you, once you have gotten to age 18 and we have replaced your limb at 18, we do know that you should be able to use that limb for another 5 to 10 years. Again, because we would have worked with you over a number of years. And it doesn't mean that because we're no longer giving you limbs, we're no longer a part of your life. And that's where the young person's ability project or program that we run does come in. And so we continue to be a part of your life. We believe that you'll be equipped at that time to have what it takes to now replace your own limb by yourself, or every 10 years or something, as the case may be, or be able to fix it. That's the first part. Why affordability? Affordability because prosthetic limbs are very expensive, depending on the aesthetics that you want to bring into the prosthesis. And when you think about it, the major functionalities of even having a basic modular prosthesis, which is your basic kind of limb that has a knee joint, that has an elbow joint, as the case may be, or the kind of foot that helps adapt the child to everyday living, is not cheap at all. So basically, you would see that there are a lot of parents that are in, the slums or that cannot afford it. Even a mid-tier family might not even be able to afford consistently change of the prosthetic limb, especially in a country like Nigeria or in Africa at large, where insurance is like luxury, basically. And most insurance facilities or that you have do not cater for products like prosthetic limb. It's considered today as cosmetics. Again, that's work that we are doing to see how to change that narrative, because it's not cosmetic, it's needed for everyday living. Yeah. So that's why these are the two key things that are prioritized when we want to work with a child. There are other things that we do look at, but these are just like the top ones that we do look up when we are making the decision or a criteria for giving a limb to a child.
Got it. Got it. That is very, very clear. Thanks a lot for sharing all of that. I mean, it's good to know that, a lot of thinking. I'm sure you've done this over the years, right? So a lot of thinking, a lot of learning has gone into these, and you've been able to refine the process to that point, where you're able to clearly say, okay, these are going to be the criteria through which we will filter our request. So that makes a lot of sense, right? And I'm sure that your donors or the partnering organizations, right, are excited about the will be excited about the rigor and the discipline that you bring into the allocation of scarce resources. So thanks for all that you do, right? Now I think we need to let's go back now. Let's go back to how it all started, because I know you, right? You know you you are not a person with disability yourself, right? And I'm just wondering, how did the whole story start, right? What led you to this point? How did you decide that this is what I'm going to do, right? Up to the point that you actually quit your job at some point, right? And if I might add again, like I used to have to some of our guests, a well-paying job, right, to come and do this, right? So let's go a little bit of a memory lane. How did you get into this? What brought it about, right? And then we can talk a little bit about the transition from paid employment into all of this later on. But let's start with the story first. Over to you.
Oh, wow. It's interesting that we're going back, and usually this can be very emotional for me, but also I think over the years I realized that for you to have a sustainable business, there has to be a story behind what it is that we do. So I gave birth to my first child with a congenital deformity, which led to the amputation of her leg. So at the time, about 16 years ago, when I gave birth to my daughter, she had what was called tibia hemimelamia. Tibia hemimelamia. And tibia hemimelamia, I tried to research. There is no reason why it happens. Yeah, it just
Mm.
happens to the lucky few. And
What you feel indeed, yeah.
uh, when this happened, we were told that we needed to amputate that leg for her to be able to live a sustainable life. It wasn't like there were no other options, but it just really felt like the other options were not options that would sustain her. She would be in and out of the hospital every time. And so, as we waited and researched and tried to get the needed help uh, that we need for her, we realized that we had to do the amputation. So the leg was amputated about 2 years and 3 months after we gave it to her, and and then the journey began because it started unfolding. That life was not very sympathetic to persons with disabilities in Nigeria at the time. um, Even before the amputation, she couldn't walk. And so people would ask questions of why we were carrying, a girl that was supposed to be walking. So um, after that process, really, um, I was still doing my job, just still living my life normally until I realized that if I wasn't careful, there wasn't a world for my daughter to live in. So I started writing. I started blogging. I started just sharing my daily experience of having to parent a child with disability. And that in itself, it's another conversation. Yeah. And until I met a family that had their own child and their own life had ceased as a result of that. And I couldn't, because I was still doing my job, I was getting support from my office just to help my child live the needed life that she needed to have. And so I was wondering, why would your life stop? Why would you stop your business? Why wouldn't you be able to live a full life just because you gave birth to your child? And I realized that there were so many more people going through the same thing. And after a while, doctors will also call me again. I breezed over it, but it took us 2 years and 3 months to make a decision that we knew about 6 days after we gave birth to her. 6 days after, we were told amputation, but it took us 2 years and 3 months. And we are educated people. We understood the science of it. So imagine the people that are not educated or people that did not have access to the kind of information that we had access to making the same decision. So doctors will call from time to time and say, "Hey, we just met a family. They are having the exact same situation as your child. They are supposed to do the amputation, but they are not making a decision. Do you want to help us speak to them? If we're not careful, this child will die." And there
Mm,
was just a lot of conversation back end. So
mm.
I I started talking to parents.
Wa-
Not
Was that
necessarily.
after? Was that after the amputation was done or before?
No, after we did our own amputation
After you did
of
your amputation. Okay.
limb. Yeah.
Mm.
So now they had seen, for lack of a better word, a case study of someone that has done the same thing that they've been trying to do. Yeah. So it was like success story. So they were using us, for other families. And so I spoke with a parent that the child had the exact same situation as my daughter's. But he's a boy. And you know, the boy at this time was, I think, about 5 years old. So they didn't go ahead. And I spoke with her. Interestingly, they never amputated till date, but he's one of the champions at the foundation. But eventually, they gave birth to another child that had both limbs with the same issue. So that they did amputate. But I had parents like that. And so I met a child, double amputee, and about same age as my daughter that needed prosthetic limbs. And so my daughter was already using limbs at this time, moving all around the place. And so that day I came back to the office and I told my manager, I said, please, I need your help. And she said, what is that? I said, I'm trying to raise money to give a child a limb. Sure, how much is this going to cost? At the time, it was going to cost us, I think, about 500,000 naira. So I said, 500,000. She said, for both legs? I said, yes. She said, okay, I'll give you X amount. I went to another friend in the office. Before it was evening that day, we were able to raise the money for the child's
Wow.
both legs. And so
Wow.
I reached out to the parent and said, I'm interested in being a part of this child's life, to help the child walk and all of that. And that's how the journey of making limbs. There was no organization, by the way, at this time. I had not set up an organization. We gave the limbs. I gave reports to everybody. Just shared WhatsApp of this is what's going on and all of that. But as I started engaging with parents, I realized that there had to be a sustainable way to doing this. In fact, I think I talked to a friend then about it, and he told me, he said, how long are you going to continue to collect money from people and they keep paying it into your account? You need to have an organization. And I'm like, I don't want to run an organization. Because again, like you rightly said, you have this high paying job. It wasn't about an organization for me. It was
Yeah.
just one child, a limb per time, living a full
Mm,
life that my own
mm.
daughter was now enjoying. And so I talked with this friend again, but the friend insisted and said, I'm not sure you've seen how big what you're doing is, but for you to be able to do more than one child, you need to register an organization. So I'm a person of faith, so I spent some time praying about it and just saying, this organization thing, I'm not sure. But sometimes June 2012, it was like a moment with God. And I just sat down by myself. I think about 7 p.m. From about 7 p.m. to about 1 a.m., I was just writing. Whatever I was writing, I didn't know how far it was going, but I have a notebook that was full. I just kept writing and writing. It was like, the playbook of of what it was going to be. And I just wrote down and wrote down. Got again to the office the next, because again, my friends are the people in the office. And I started talking to one or two people and say, I'm thinking of registering an organization. What are your thoughts? And so different people gave me ideas and all of that. Put that together, did a bit of research, and I said, you know what? I want to share with people the exact same help I got personally, which was I had access to information. I had people to support me in terms of a support group, even though it was not organized. It wasn't an organized group. It was just friends, family, people in church, and all of that. I wanted to do same, and I'm like, I want to empower. I want to make sure that every child is able to live independently of this disability. Again, if you take your mind back, 2 years and 3 months before that time, we had to carry our daughter everywhere we went. We had to, she couldn't walk. So it was either she was crawling or you were carrying her. And when people are immobile for a bit, they start adding a bit of weight, you know, considerable weight. So she was very big at the time. So if you look at my frame, I'm also very small. So having to carry her consistently uh, every day, almost every time, became a burden. And so I was having shoulder pain. It was, you look for every opportunity to say, sit down versus carry. And children would want to carry it anytime. So that's how, um, we registered the Irede Foundation.
Hey, thanks a lot for taking the time to watch the podcast. We are super thankful for you taking that time and investing the time to learn. We hope that you find the story inspiring, and beyond that, that you've been able to articulate one or two things that you want to do differently in your own entrepreneurial journey. May I encourage you to please like, subscribe, comment, and please share the word within your own circle of influence, especially within those that you think are on the same entrepreneurial journey with you. May I also encourage you to please, beyond subscribing to our YouTube channel, follow us on our other social media platforms. That means a lot to us, and we can see that that helps us to track that we're making some progress and so making some impact. Thanks a lot once again for taking the time to watch, and we'll see you on the next episode.